Hey, first grade friends, we're back again for Chapter 8 of The Winter of the Ice Wizard by Mary Pope Osborne. When we left off, Jack and Annie had rescued the eye and the hailstone, and they were rushing back to get it back to the palace before the sun came up. Chapter 8 is called Return of the Eye. Jack and Annie walked through the front hall of the palace, past the ice columns and into the wizard's throne room. The walls and floor glittered with the brilliant cold light of dawn. "Uh-oh," said Jack. The wizard was waiting for them, and the two white wolves were sleeping on either side of his throne. Jack was confused. Why are they here? He wondered. Do they belong to the wizard? The wolves lifted their heads and sniffed the air, their ears pricked up. When they caught sight of Jack and Annie, they sprang up to their feet, and they stared at them with their piercing yellow eyes. The ice wizard was staring intently at Jack and Annie. "Well, did you bring back my eye?" "Yes," said Jack. Annie took the hailstone out of her pocket and held it up to the wizard. Jack watched the wolves nervously as the hailstone passed from Annie's small hand into the wizard's large, rough hand. The wizard stared down at the chunk of ice. Then he looked back at Jack and Annie. "Indeed, you are heroes," he said breathlessly. "Not really," Jack murmured. The wizard looked again at the eye and the hailstone. Then with a quick movement, he slammed the ice chunk against the arm of his throne. Jack and Annie gasped and stepped back. The wizard slammed the hailstone against his throne again, and this time the ice cracked. The wizard gently pried his eye out of the heart of the hailstone. He lifted the frozen eyeball into the air and studied it in the light. Then with an eager cry, he ripped off his eye patch. Jack and Annie watched in amazement as the wizard fitted his eye into the dark, empty socket. Jack held his breath. He was horrified, yet fascinated. He couldn't imagine someone just shoving an eye back into his head. The wizard slowly lowered his hand. He seemed to be holding his breath. He had two eyes, but the new one didn't move. It looked as if it were still frozen. Jack grew worried. If the eye didn't work, the wizard might not help them. We brought you your eye," he said. "So now can you tell us where Merlin and Morgan are now?" The wizard jerked his head to look at Jack. He covered one eye with his hand. Then he covered the other. In a frenzy, he went back and forth, covering and uncovering each eye. Finally, the wizard dropped his hands and roared, "No!" The wizard's howl shook the ice columns. "You have tricked me!" "No, we haven't," said Annie. "This eye is useless," cried the wizard. "It has no life, no sight." "But that's the eye you gave to the Norns," said Annie. "You promised if we brought it back, you'd give us Merlin and Morgan." The two white wolves threw back their heads and howled. "No," cried the wizard. "You tricked me, you tricked me." "Let's get out of here," whispered Jack. He pulled Annie toward the two columns. "Stop!" shouted the wizard. "You cannot escape me." He grabbed Merlin's staff of strength. The wolves growled and yelped. The wizard pointed the staff at Jack and Annie, and he started to say a spell. Row-ee! Wait! Someone yelled. Teddy burst into the throne room. Wait! Wait! The wizard held his staff in the air. He stared wildly at Teddy, whose face was twisted with rage. We have something for you, Teddy shouted at the wizard. Kathleen, he called. Kathleen stepped out from behind the ice columns. With her was a young woman with long braids. The woman wore a flowing dress. Around her shoulders was a white feathered cloak. Her eyes rested on the wizard, and a radiant smile spread across her face. She began walking slowly toward the throne. The wizard lowered Merlin's staff of strength, and he stared back at the young woman. All the color drained from his face. For a long moment, he was as still as a statue. Then an ice blue tear leaked out of his frozen eye and ran down his white cheek. Jack and Annie stood with Kathleen and Teddy. They all watched the young woman and the ice wizard gaze silently at each other. Is she his sister, the Swan Maiden? Whispered Annie. Yes, whispered Kathleen. The Swan Maiden spoke to the ice wizard in a strange language. Valivenewan. The wizard didn't answer. Tears flowed gently now from both of his eyes. Valivenewan, the Swan Maiden said again. What's she saying? Jack asked. She is saying, I have come to forgive you, said Kathleen. The wizard stood up. He walked down the steps from his throne. He gently touched the Swan Maiden's face, as if to make sure she were real. Then he answered her softly in the strange language. Felowan. How did you find her? Jack asked Teddy. A seal took us under the ice to the Isle of the Swans, said Teddy. When we found her, I told her how much the wizard had missed her. I also told her about the two of you and how you always help each other. I told her she should return to her brother and be his friend again. The wizard and his sister kept speaking softly to each other in the strange language. Warm sunlight shimmered through the palace windows. Annie stepped forward. Excuse me? The wizard looked at her. My sister has returned home, he said with wonder. I can see with both eyes now. I can see perfectly. I'm glad, said Annie, but now you must give Merlin and Morgan back to us. The wizard looked at his sister. She nodded. The wizard held out Merlin's staff of strength. Use this to bring them back. Hold it tightly and call out to them. He gave the staff to Annie. Annie, could barely lift it by herself. Hold it with me, Jack. Jack stepped forward and grabbed the magic staff. The smooth golden wood felt warm and vibrant in his hands. As they gripped the staff together, Annie threw back her head and called out, Merlin! Morgan! Come back! A long burst of blue light shot out of the end of the staff and flashed toward the two white wolves. Suddenly, wolf eyes changed into human eyes. Wolf noses changed into human noses. Wolf mouths changed into human mouths. Wolf ears became human ears. Wolf paws came into human hands and feet. wool fur into long red cloaks. The two white wolves were gone, and a man and a woman stood in their place. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 8. Have to leave you in suspense for chapter 9, which we called Wisdom of the Heart. Take care, my friends.